How do you build a team that gets things done? That's what we're going to talk about on today's episode of The Art and Science of Difficult Conversations. Welcome to the Art and Science of Difficult Conversations, where we believe if you communicate better, you live better. As always, I'm one of your hosts, Chris. I own Leadership Potential, working with leaders to navigate transitions, rebuild trust, and fix broken cultures using these hard conversations. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Lucy.
I am owner of Mind Victory mental fitness gym for leaders, their teams, and even their families.
And today we are talking about how do you make your teams work better and stronger and perform at a higher level. And we're excited to be joined by a friend of the podcast, a leadership transformation architect, founder of Influential Skills, and creator of a proprietary leadership framework, Building a Culture of Champions. And he's not just some guy that built this leadership program. He's also been part of 3 college national championship teams. He's been there, he's done that, he's transformed leaders, and he's done the work to create high performing teams. So we love to welcome Jevon Gondwe. Jevon, welcome.
Thank you. I am super excited to be here. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I know it's going to be a great episode today.
Awesome. Jevon, what makes you so passionate about this leadership, influence, and team performance?
Yeah, I think it's a great kind of opening question. I think for me, there's a kind of a cliche quote I'll share that you may have heard before, but a changed life like changes lives. And for me, I've been mentored and coached and led by people who have had a tremendous influence in my life, right? And I think if you look at, anyone listening to this podcast, you've probably had a mentor or a coach or an influencer, or you've been a part of environments with great leadership, and it changed how you think, it changed how you operated. But you've also been a part of environments where the leadership was not great and you wanted to run away as quickly as possible. And a lot of my values, as many do, are come from my roots, right? Both my parents were educators. My father, was born and raised in Malawi, a small country in Africa, for those that don't know, and came to the States, to learn and get educated, and ended up staying and being a professor. And my mom was a reading specialist, so I grew up in a home of education, right, and teaching. But also, I grew up with a global mindset and wanting to unify people. And I think in today's culture, and today, a lot of people, especially in America, um, it's called what it is. They're a little more divided. And I think, in my opinion, the only way to really bring people together is strong leadership, right? And, I may talk about this maybe as we go, but, if you think, I've worked in about 7 different industries. I've worked in corporate, I've worked in nonprofit, I've obviously run my own company, and I've seen a lot of different factors, but I've seen large organizations that have great organizational culture, and I've seen large organizations that have poor organizational culture. So this ripple effect of leadership, and I'll illustrate it through kind of a personal story. So one of the things I learned kind of in developing people and developing myself was this idea of self-affirmations. You've probably heard of these things where you write down things and attributes about yourself of what you want, right? So if I want to be more confident, I want to be more well-spoken, I want to be a better public speaker, you write these things down on paper, you read them out loud, you read them into a mirror. There's all different science behind this of changing your brain chemistry, to be a more confident person, right? And so I do this for people I coach all the time as kind of foundational principles, especially if I want to help them grow their self confidence. Well, I learned this from a leader, right? I learned this from somebody else who's taught that to me, that made me better. Well, I took that and I made it a gift for my mom. I gave her this gift of photos of our family and affirmation, because I wanted to help my mom with, build her self confidence, build her self image. This was by a decade ago. And many years later, I come to find out that she took that same teaching that I gave her, and she did a workshop on it, with one of her groups that she works with, where she lived at the time. And I shared that story because there was someone who taught me that, who doesn't know my mom. I then turned around and taught it to my mom. My mom turned around and taught it to a group of people that I've never met. And that's the untold story of great leadership, because you have an impact and an influence well beyond the people that you touch. And to me, that's what
Mm.
servant leadership is all about, at the core of everything that I talk about, and the books that I read, the things that I listen to, at the heart of everything. And then my personal opinion, the responsibility of a leader is to help other people. That's the mission, that's the objective, that's the goal. And for me, it's about maximizing human potential and human performance, which is why I get so passionate because I've seen my life get changed, and I've seen countless others get changed through leadership as well.
I love that story. I love your global influence. And I think that's always helpful for people to see different perspectives. I'm curious, from what you've seen, what you've experienced, why do you think it is so hard for people to understand that link of influence and impact and just that and what people get? I feel like people get servant leadership so wrong. I feel like they always twist into let me do everything for you as opposed to let me help you perform at your best and do what you need to do.
Yeah. So, kind of what's the heart of your question there?
What do you think people get? Why do you think people get that wrong so much? Why do you think it gets twisted in how people understand all that?
Yeah, I think uh, this might be controversial, maybe not, but I think sometimes we're too easy on other people and we're hard on ourselves. Uh,
Mm,
and I think the opposite, not the opposite, but I think that for a leader, it's our responsibility to push people to help them become better. And so, hopefully, you can follow my full thought here. My son, okay, he's 3.5 years old. And I remember when he was maybe 7 months, okay, he's 7 months old, and he's stuck under a table. He's just learning to crawl, and he's stuck. And he'd been playing with a little red ball. I have a video of this too. It's kind of cool. He's a little red ball, and he's just reaching for it. He's reaching for it, and he's not able to get it because his perspective is off. He's trying to get it directly to where the ball is. If he just turned a little to the left, he'd be clear. But he's so focused on the ball at hand and he's not able to get it. So he starts crying. He's upset. Now, the normal thing for I think most gut reaction for a parent is, oh, let me just pick him up, pull him out of his misery, and help him. Right? That's why people think of servant leadership. They think, okay, I'm just going to help them up. I'm going to just deliver them to the end solution. But through that, it's easier, right? My son's not going to grow through that. And you need to go through struggle and uncomfortable feelings and uncomfortable emotions if you're going to grow on the other side, right? That is a core element. So for me, servant leadership is about a couple things. One, how can I focus on the other person's objectives and goals and help maximize their own growth and potential so they can accomplish more than they could without me?
mm,
And I do that in a way where I'm focusing on what they want and I can help them get there. And organizationally, it's got to also line up with what the team needs too, right? So I'm not going to sacrifice that person's individual goals at the compromise of the overall team. That's not good either. So how do we line up the organizational vision, the team vision, along with the goals now of the individual I'm serving? Now, in this situation, in this context, what I did was I started coaching my son through it. I started giving him a broader perspective, and I ultimately ended up shifting the ball still same distance away, but I shifted it like 2 feet to one direction. He was still stuck, but all it did was change his perspective. And then he was able to get out on his own. And so the whole idea for me is that, when it kind of to your question, I think people are afraid that they're not going to get the results that they want if they're a leader unless they do it themselves. And what they'll find is if they do that over time, they become a bottleneck on everything that they want to get accomplished. And I'm a big John
mm,
Maxwell fan. I'm sure he's not the only one that said this, but essentially, we're talking about delegation or duplication or passing on knowledge. If someone else can get 80% of the results as you, give them the freedom to fail. And I'm sure this will come up as we're talking today because I think this is an important element to great leadership. But creating psychological safety, right? I'm sure it's a buzzword, on your podcast. It's such an
mm,
essential piece, and a big part of that is creating an environment where it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to stop learning. And so when you have that environment where people are constantly expected to learn and grow and raise the culture and raise the standard, but it's okay to make mistakes while you're learning, now
mhm,
you create an environment where people are okay sharing that they made a mistake. They're okay with failing. And so you're going to get that person who isn't maybe performing at the highest level, but they're actually going to come to you and tell you, hey, I'm actually struggling with this. I'd like some support. I need some more resources, or I need some more training, or I need a break for a moment. I need to be able to step away because there's still a high standard and expectation for personal growth. right? It's not okay to keep failing on the same thing, but it is okay to lean in and with a growth mindset, right? Harold Dweck's work, I'm sure it's come up on this podcast as well.
Yeah.
So Pivotal's work. So hopefully that connects.
So I'm hearing there are different skills. I am hearing maybe coaching, delegation. What other skills would you say are important for somebody who wants to be a great leader?
Yeah, that you could do, like, there's books written and books and posters and movies done, right, on all the things.
Yeah.
I'll share from the context of what for me are my areas of expertise, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the pain points that are causing disengagement in the workforce, that are causing lack of, turnover, right? People are, they show up to a job and then they leave within 6 months, or worse, they stay miserable, right? Like that this happens a lot. And I think a lot of cultures are struggling with this. And in my opinion, it really breaks down into three areas that I've kind of designed as what I mentioned a little bit earlier. You mentioned earlier about my leadership framework, building a culture of champions. And so for me, it's a foundation of number one, personal growth. And people go, is that a skill? Yeah, yeah, it is. There's some people that do it, they're just kind of random. They binge LinkedIn, they binge a podcast, but they don't actually apply it, and they have no real game plan for how to intentionally grow over time and consistently and effectively reflect. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to that. And I think for me, that is the number one foundation for a leader, because personal growth isn't just about what you're learning. It's not just, it's information, yes, but it's a sign of humility. It's a sign of low ego. The person who is actively growing is admitting, I need to learn. They're admitting I need to grow.
Hmm.
I'll bring that back to my time again at Messiah. Dave Brandt, one of the winningest coaches of all time in of any division in college soccer. And I didn't have the context at the time, but every meeting that we had as a team and many individually, he was talking and quoting from books. He always had a book with him. And when him and his coaching staff initially designed the program, which by the way, when he left, he had won 6 national championships from the program that had 0 prior. And his coach that took over for him, who studied under him, Brad McCarty, won 5 more national championships.
Nice.
Right. There's
Nice.
a system there, right? There's an ongoing, and the core piece to that was personal growth. And I always thought he was just really smart, and he is, and he is, but it was the reading, and then the other. And I know, just for the sake of time in this conversation, there were really 4 other skills that are, for me, relate to communications and relationship building skills that come from my framework that will sound familiar. And I'll just kind of walk through them quickly. But a
Yeah,
champion's
please.
ear, right? A champion's ear. What is that? That's actively engaging and listening with a focus on bringing the best out of somebody. It's not just listening to be empathetic. Yes, you do that, but it's with the lens that I want to bring the best out of you. The visionary spark. Now, vision is talked about in a lot of different environments, right? The corporate vision, but usually it's words on a paper, but not actionable. When I say the visionary spark, yes, I'm talking about an overarching team vision, like the Messiah soccer program. It was to be the best place in the country to play college soccer. But I'm also talking about casting micro visions. Every time we're getting together with someone that we're mentoring or coaching, we need to be able to cast a vision for the project. What are
Hmm.
we working on, but why are we working on it? And help them understand their role in that, and asking questions. Hey, how do you think that you would fit into this? Right? What do you think your role could be? This creates buy-in. This creates engagement, right? That constant visionary spark. The third one is language of victory. Listen, I don't know a great culture that people aren't speaking about where we're going, the victory that we're having, the strengths that we have, but also on an individual basis with people you're mentoring and coaching, is how do I talk you through and help you become more aware of the value and the strengths that you have, right? Everyone needs someone that believes in them, right? Like everyone has had somebody at some point. And if you haven't, usually you have a lower self-image, right? It helps validate, who you are and what you're showing up for. And if you do those first 3 skills really well, then Lucy, you mentioned already, the one that is kind of core is then coaching. I call it coaching for gold, right? You need to, in my opinion, as a team leader, we need to coach people. And I know the whole podcast here is about the art of, dealing with difficult conversations. Well, in the context of team building, in my experience, if you do these couple things I just said really well, you're personally growing, you're listening, with a champion's ear, you're casting a vision, you're speaking victory into that person, you're uplifting and you're encouraging people. What you're going to do then is build trust, and you're going to build buy-in, you're going to build engagement, you're going to build people that lean into you, that actually want your perspective because of your leadership, and you've shown that you actually care about them as a person and their vision for their career and their growth, which then opens the door for coaching at a high level. You see,
Mm,
when I was playing soccer at Messiah, there was an expectation that, and a shared vision and a shared standard of excellence. So when we were coached, whether it was constructive coaching or validation coaching, meaning, hey, you're on the right track, or hey, you screwed up, either way, we wanted it. See, what makes it difficult in having conversations is you think the person on the other side of the conversation doesn't want to have the conversation. If you knew, especially in a context of team building, that they wanted your feedback, how quickly would you have the conversation? You wouldn't give
mm,
it. In fact,
yep.
you would feel bad about not having the conversation because you're basically giving up on their opportunity for growth. And so I think when you start to create a culture around this, a championship culture, there's that shared standard and a shared vision of excellence. So the coaching part just becomes building awareness and creating clear game plan on how we're going to help you develop and grow. And it really minimizes a lot of the tension and friction that comes along with it. So my goal of art of dealing with those difficult conversations is just to avoid them, but not avoid them in the sense that I don't want to have them, but create an environment where I remove the friction before it even has an opportunity to show up, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of a leader I worked with one time who I gave them a simple assessment for their team. I said, have everybody write on a piece of paper what their vision for the team is. What's the purpose of our team? And then put it into a bag and see if everybody wrote the same thing, essentially.
Yeah.
And it was like a gut check. She didn't have to do it. She just said, I bet I know one or two people will write something different. And so that like immediately to her was, oh, I know this is exactly why we're not functioning well. Is because we're not even on the same page of why we're doing this. So
I love that.
to that point, to your point, let's say you have those people. What's your conversation with them looking like in order to get them aligned? How are you aligning them back or and exploring to figure out what's going on there?
Yeah. So for me, vision is about passion. It's about understanding, the a compelling environment of what people want to move forward towards. I'll keep going back to my sports environment, but Dave Brandt, his kind of go-to for vision was this question that would kind of help stimulate it, which is, you know, um, what's the way that things ought to be, right? What's the ideal state? What's the ideal state of things? And when you start thinking that way, it's kind of aspirational, right? If you're bringing the right people on, they've already need to fit your values, that you've decided for your team, your organization, right? So if one of your values is being competitive, if one of your values is low ego, whatever those values are, we need to be able to have real conversations with people on an individual basis about, hey, where do you see yourself fitting in? Because I think there's a balance of, as a leader, setting the vision, setting the standard, but you also need to constantly gain feedback and insight and data from your team so that they have ownership in the goals, in the team, in the vision. And it's when people have ownership that they buy in, they engage. They'll deal with the PTO policy that changed a little bit. They'll deal with the return to work maybe to a degree depending on their situation. But they'll deal with, hey, the coffee maker broke today in the office. Like they'll deal with some of that stuff if they have ownership in the team and where it's going. A
Hmm.
lot of people don't have ownership because you have not empowered them to do that through a real personalized conversation. It's not going to happen in an email. It's not going to happen in a PowerPoint. It's going to happen because an individual leader has a real conversation and it opens a door for conversation. Because, I always say, if you have someone who's going to leave your company, the leader of that person should know before it actually happens, right? Like it shouldn't be a surprise. Now, something can always come out of the blue, of course, but in general, there should be enough ongoing conversation and open dialogue that this person's bought in or they're not. And if they're not bought in, let's talk about that. Why are they not bought in? And ultimately, we should be finding a better place for them and find someone else who can fill that spot. And I've got so many examples, from the sports world where, one person individual, won't give too much context. I never know who might be listening to this, but he was on the team for a short time. And what ended up happening was he had more personal things that were more important to his vision, which then led him to skipping a lot of team events and not showing up. And the coach essentially had a conversation with them and, hey, listen, like, is this something that's really important to you? We brought you in because we saw your potential. We brought you in. This is huge, believing in people. Let them know that you care. We brought you in for these reasons. We see you as a major player, but here's also what we're seeing. And this is causing some friction with the team and the players and the culture that we're trying to protect here. Hey, do you think you can lean in here? Or is it more important that you do X, Y, and Z? And in his case, he
Mm,
said, you know what? It actually is more important that I do this over here. Fantastic. But at least now we're not playing a game of constant
yeah.
friction of why this person's not, showing up.
Mm. So it looks like when the vision, the individual vision and the team vision is misaligned, kind of really having that open dialogue and conversations.
Yeah.
I am curious about any steps, simple steps for anybody who is listening, how they can create their own vision in their team, let's say.
Yeah, I even think, what Chris shared earlier is great, right? To initially get some feel and get some ideas. But going back to that, the way things ought to be, right? So thinking about that from a couple different environments, usually vision inspires feelings and emotions, right? There's an emotional connection. There can be very tangible things. But I'll just couple things I would ask, hey, what do you think are some of those important values to our team to be successful? There's a book I recommend too called Vivid Vision. Hey, no royalties here. But Vivid Vision, by I think it's Cameron. I don't want to say I'm blank on his last name right now. But he talks about this concept of looking 3 years into the future and painting a picture of the perfect environment, right? And being as clear as possible. What does our culture look like? What does our Zoom world or not Zoom world look like? What kind of events would make a good environment for us? What kind of performance would we look like? What should our team meetings actually look like? Like like we should really be able to visualize very clearly some of the most important big rocks, in our organization. What should compensation even look like? Now, that's not something you're always going to have with that. That's probably more of a leadership team, C-suite conversation. But thinking in the context of, let's just say, your digital marketing team, right? Hey, how do we want to, what's our presence? What should that be on social media, right? What kind of innovation should we be having? Like just having these kind of very clear conversations. I love brainstorming and getting in a room with each other and, drawing things out. Yes. But at some point in time, you've got to kind of map that out. And I think from a organizational perspective, that's going to be kind of high level. But I really think that on a team level, I worked with a really successful, I'll just say, marketing team at one point. And I don't even know if it was on paper, but there was a clear vision that we wanted to be the most dynamic and fun marketing team. Certainly the team in that organization, and that was constantly a part of our environment. We wanted to perform, but we wanted to have fun and be creative, right? It was a constant part of that culture, and that came about because that's what the leader wanted, and he set those expectations up front, right, from the very beginning, so that the right vision was in place and the right people wanted to lean into that vision.
Mm.
Makes sense.
And I love that idea of solution focused, right? That question, like, what do we want to be and all that stuff. It's breaks out of that. Let me just keep complaining about what's not going
Yeah,
right or what I don't like.
yeah. Yeah, 100%, right? Because I think that happens a lot where, let's just again keep coming back to this, the art of difficult conversations. I think actually what can make them the most difficult isn't the conversation itself, it's thinking about the conversation, right? It's spending in some cases, in a lot of family dynamics, which that's not my expertise, that's for sure. But family dynamics, people can think about a conversation for years that they're not having. And I was listening to a podcast the other day. Ryan Leake, if you know Ryan Leake, I don't know him personally, but he does a lot of leadership stuff and similar but different work that I do. And he was talking about how not just difficult conversations, but situations with people where they're the problem, right? And a lot of times we are thinking about them being the problem, but he's like, hey, have you actually had a conversation with them? Like, do they have they said they want to change? Like, have they actually said that? If you haven't had a conversation and they've never expressed that they want to change, why are we frustrated with that person? I'm specifically talking about the context of a team dynamics, right? There's a lot of other types of difficult conversations, but talking from a team dynamic, and I think a lot of times, we allow those difficult conversations that we haven't had. You've heard this before, false evidence appearing real, right? Fear, false evidence appearing real. We make up stories in our mind of how that conversation is going to go, and we always, even though there's no evidence, we think it's going to go poorly. And I'll just share, my wife and I, we've been married since 2016. We've been together since 2012. And thank goodness both of us are into reading books and seeking mentorship and seeking counsel, because if we weren't, I don't know if have a great marriage today,
Mm.
because I am very just kind of open, visionary, high level concept. Details don't matter, right? She's detailed, disciplined, gets things done, hard charging, and very driven. And we built our first business together, and so we've done a lot, together, and accomplished a lot together. But if we didn't have these skills to sit down and just be like, what you said the other day, I know it wasn't your intent, but it hurt my feelings. I need you to know that. I'm not looking to solve it right now, but I just need you to be aware. I love you. I care about you. We're on the same team. Like, those kind of conversations are so crucial versus it festering,
Mm.
because it did early on, but then we matured, read some books, grew closer through those, crucial conversations or vulnerable conversations, whatever you want to call it.
Jevon, I think what would be helpful, I'd love to role play all this with you because I think it'd be helpful for our audience to kind of see how it feels and sounds. Because I've in my work, I've noticed some people are perfectly comfortable having the conversation. They just don't know what to say in it. They're just lost for words. So I think we've done role plays before on our podcast. We'd love to role play with you if you're open to it.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's do it.
And cut. Be sure to listen to part 2 of this episode to hear the roleplay. And if you don't want to wait and want to know how to reach out to Jevon today, we got you covered.
Jevon, how can they learn more? How can they reach out to you and find you?
Yeah, appreciate the question. So if you know the spelling of my name, I'm pretty Googleable. My name is SEO friendly with Jevon Gondwe. But my website, www.influentialskills.com, has a lot of my background on, my perspectives, leadership frameworks, all that great stuff. And I do content on LinkedIn as well. So LinkedIn is a great place to follow me for content. And I do a lot of leadership transformation, right? Coaching, workshops, working with organizations over the course of 3 to 6 months. Because I'm not just on one off. It's about transforming behaviors and transforming identities. Atomic Habits is a great book for that. But transforming identities so we become a better version of ourselves, and that's the core of what I do for individuals and for organizations is that transformation over time. So
Jevon, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you,
absolutely.
Jevon.
This was fantastic. I look forward to collaborating with you guys in the future and sharing your podcast more as well. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jevon.
Thank you. And if you want to learn more about Jevon, all that stuff he talked about, we're going to put it in the show notes so you can follow us. If you want to learn more about any of the difficult conversation courses that I'm running, especially the live 5-day sprint that I've got going on in this fall, you can reach out to me, get the information in the show notes. And Lucy,
If you are struggling staying calm in that difficult conversations, reach out to me. We can do a saboteur assessment and seeing what's getting in the way and how to address that.
awesome. Well, thank you everybody for being here. We will see you next week for another episode of our podcast.